All right, welcome guys. Good to see you, and good to see you once again in my home kitchen. I've had to record this over spring break. Today we are going to be doing our third mother sauce, which is sauce bechamel, and then we are going to be taking that sauce and turning it into a cheddar sauce mornay, which is traditionally a cheese sauce made with Gruyere and a few other cheeses. Today we're going to be doing it with a regular cheddar cheese. All right, first things first, let's go over the ingredients. You're going to need 1 pound of dried pasta. Any dried pasta will do. Traditionally, you use elbow macaroni, but you can use anything you want. You want to try to choose noodles that are circular or have like kind of a tube shape to it that will hold and cling onto the sauce. You're going to need 1 egg, 4 tablespoons or 1/4 of a cup or 2 ounces of unsalted butter. Now, we talked about the importance of using unsalted butter. If you don't have butter, you can use other fats such as bacon fat, oil. You can use margarine. It's just not quite as good of flavor. 1/4 of a cup or 1.5 ounces of all-purpose flour. 2.5 cups of whole milk or 20 ounces. 1 teaspoon of mustard. Now this is an optional ingredient, but completely up to you. 1 pound of shredded cheese. Now, real important here, okay? For the cheese, even though it is a little bit of extra work, you have to go with whole cheese that has been grated yourself. Now, if you don't have a cheese grater, you can just take a knife and just cut this up into very fine pieces here. The important reason why I say that is because a lot of cheese that is pre-shredded in the store has things like cornstarch or potato starch or tapioca starch that's meant to keep the cheese from kind of clumping up in the bag, which is good in a bag, but in a sauce, it kind of makes the final sauce kind of gritty. So you go with whole cheese here. You're going to need 1 pound of it, which is 2 of these small 8-ounce blocks. As far as what cheese you go with, you can kind of choose whatever you'd like. So long as the cheese is good at melting, it'll work here. Here I have cheddar. You can go with Colby Jack. You can go with Swiss. You can go with mozzarella. Really play around with it. Today's recipe is really customizable. So play around with it. All right, you're going to need at least 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt. For at least the sauce, you're probably going to need a lot more for the pasta itself, but we'll get to that in a minute. 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. Now, as far as other flavors, you can go with any sort of spice mix that you like. Play around with this. This is completely your mac and cheese here. Also, you're going to need, for the sauce, you're going to need 1/2 of an onion that's peeled. You don't have to use this, but it really does make the sauce bechamel a lot better. I'm also going to be using bay leaf here. Again, optional, but you'll see how we use it here. If you want to make a breadcrumb topping, then you're going to need 1 cup or 3.5 ounces of breadcrumbs. Today I am using panko, which is a much coarser type of breadcrumb that'll make things extra crunchy, which is definitely good. If you don't have breadcrumbs, you can take like crackers, Ritz crackers, Cheez-Its, whatever you got. Just crumble that up and you can make the topping out of that. And then for the topping, you're going to need 3 tablespoons or 1.5 ounces of butter. Okay. I also would recommend having some sort of acidic ingredient on hand, whether it's vinegar or lemon juice. Just like we said, seasoning, this is going to be a very fatty, very rich sauce, so having a little bit of acid is definitely helpful. Also, as far as how you want to garnish this or finish this, sky's the limit. Choose what vegetables sound good to you. I'm going to be using tomatoes later here and broccoli. You can go with meat, you can go with chicken, you can go bacon, you choose. Okay, so those are our base flavors. There'll be a couple other ingredients I'll use here just for flavorings, but those, but the pasta, the egg, the butter, the flour, the milk, the cheese, those are kind of the base ingredients that you need to execute this recipe. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift the camera over to the stove and we'll go from there. For the next step, I'm going to add in the 4 tablespoons of butter. And I'm just going to let that melt just a little bit here. All right, and then once melted a little bit, I'm going to sprinkle over the flour. And this is going to be a roux, the base of our roux. So a roux is just a mixture of fat and flour that is lightly cooked together. And this is what's going to thicken our bechamel sauce. Now, as you remember, or might remember, we have different levels of roux for different sauces. So a bechamel is a milk thickened with white roux. So what that means is I'm going to keep this pot over about medium heat or so. And I don't want to let this brown too much. I'm just going to cook it out just for a minute or so. Just stirring it. Be very careful. This is very hot. Okay, and once I've cooked the flour and the butter together, I'm then going to slowly whisk in or stir in my milk. So, a little bit at a time. Just a little bit. Stir that in. A little bubble and hiss. That is fine. Add a little more. Okay, now you can go a little bit more. And the reason why you want to do this in stages is just to avoid any sort of clumps. Alright, now I'm just going to add in the rest of the milk here. Alright, now, as this is coming up to a simmer, I'm just going to break this up. And now what's going to happen is as this heats up, all the starch that's in the flour is going to thicken up this sauce. Let me go ahead and switch over to a whisk. Okay. Now, important note here, if you're using a non-stick pan, do not use a metal whisk. So as this heats up, I'm going to just add the rest of my milk here. I'm going to let this come up to a simmer. So this is the next step here, is I'm going to let this come up to a simmer, and you're going to see it start to thicken up, and I'm going to cook this for about 10 minutes or so. Now, it will thicken up way sooner than that, but you need to cook it a little bit just to cook off some of that raw flour taste. In the meantime, just as far as a few flavorings, classically, I'm going to add in a bay leaf and the onion right into the sauce. Now I'm also going to add in just a squeeze or so of mustard here. Alright, now I'm just going to kind of stir this until it thickens up, comes up to a simmer. And then I'm going to cook it for about 10 or so minutes here. You'll see it will start to thicken up, just kind of keep stirring it. Alright, so you already see it's coming up to a boil. Just going to lower the heat a little bit. And I'm just going to stir this just so there's no clumps. And now I'm just going to set my timer for 10 minutes and then let it go. And as this comes up to a simmer, you don't want it at a full rolling boil. Not only will it splatter everywhere, but it's just unnecessary and it'll blow apart any aromatics that you have in there. So keep it just at a simmer, lower the heat if you need to, and just keep an eye on it. Now, as the sauce is cooking, whether you use a spoon or a whisk, just make sure you're also scraping the bottom of the pot. You don't want any milk to stick to the bottom of the pot and scorch. It'll be a real pain to have to clean up. So my sauce has thickened up, and here we have sauce bechamel. Now this is best served with any sort of white meat like chicken or fish, though on its own it's kind of bland. Here's where you want to customize it. If I were serving this with biscuits, I'd add in a ton more black pepper. Okay. If you want to do this with biscuits and gravy, you start it by cooking off some sausage, and instead of using butter, you use the fat that is in the sausage. If you want to customize it a little bit more, you can fold in whipped cream into this, not sweet whipped cream, but just whipped cream. You make a nice lighter sauce that is good for other types of fish and seafood. But today we're going to be turning it into a Mornay. So what I'm going to do here is, my next step is, I have here an egg that I'm going to put into this. Now, if I were to just add this straight up, I have a bunch of eggs and heat, this is going to scramble. It's not what I want. The reason why we're going to be adding eggs to this is not only for richness, but also because the egg yolks are going to help emulsify our fat and our cheese into this. Again, this is a liquid-based sauce. We're going to be adding fat. It's forming an emulsion. That's why we did our hollandaise sauce before we did this sauce. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently bring them together. I'm going to take a spoonful of the bechamel, and I'm just going to mix that into the eggs. Now, what that is doing is it's slowly bringing up the temperature of the egg. So that way it stays smooth and doesn't scramble into giant lumps. All right, so once I've got about a quarter cup or so of that mixed in, I'm going to add that into the sauce and quickly mix that in. At this point, my heat is off, and I'm just going to stir that in. Now, as far as the onion, I'm going to take that out. It has done its job at this point. And I'm also going to find and take out my bay leaf. Perfect. All right, and there we have it. So now from here, what we're going to do is, our next step is going to be adding our cheese. Now, like I just said, we have a lot of fat in here. We have a liquid in here. This is forming an emulsion. But in this case, where, unlike hollandaise where the fat was the continuous phase, here the liquid is the continuous phase. So I'm going to add this in just a couple handfuls at a time and slowly mix that in. So right now my heat is off. I'm going to add in my cheese and just stir that together. And before I add in my next handful of cheese, I'm going to just wait for this to fully melt in, okay, or almost fully melt in, okay. You don't want to rush this, otherwise you'll lead to a gritty or broken mac and cheese sauce, which is never good. Okay, so that's almost in, so I'm going to add in another handful. Now, this sauce isn't nearly as finicky as the hollandaise or the mayonnaise was, so you can go a little quicker here, but you just don't want to dump it all in at once. All right, so I'm going to keep doing that until all of my cheese is in the sauce. Okay, so nearly all of my cheese is melted in. At this point, your sauce may seem really, really thick. Now, for me, that's probably a little too thick, but that's okay, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until I have my pasta in here and stirred together. And then what I'll do is, if I need to thicken it, thin it out a little bit, I'll just add in a splash of milk here and there up until, until it's the consistency I want. Now here, an important step here is, once you have your cheese sauce made, taste it. Okay, chances are it's going to need something, depending on what cheese you use, depending on what flavor you're going for, depending on what spices and stuff. You have to taste this. Chances are it's going to need some acidity. Again, you have a lot of fat in here, but you may want to add more spices. You may need to add salt. You may need to add pepper or whatever you would like. So play around with it. Again, this sauce is really customizable for what you want to do. So I'm going to taste this and I'll let it set and just keep warm here on low heat. Now, while that's going, I'm going to show you real quick how to properly cook pasta. Now, I know some of you are probably rolling your eyes, like, of course, pasta, that's really, really simple. However, there is a lot of people that don't know how to do this properly. Whenever you have something really simple like cooking pasta, it's the small details that matter, as far as getting the right texture, making sure the pasta doesn't stick, and also getting the right flavor and texture. All right, so first things first, I have a pot of water up here in the pot. I have my heat on high. Now, one of the first steps you want to do is to properly season and salt your pasta water. You can see I put quite a bit there, and I just kind of eyeballed that. Now, it's important here because pasta is a starch. Starches need a lot of seasoning. The way you do that is by seasoning your pasta water. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this come up to a full rolling boil. Then I will put my pasta in and then stir it quite a bit for the first minute or so, okay? So when the water comes up to a boil, I'm going to show you how to do that next. All right, so you see I've got my water up to a rolling boil, so I'm going to add in the pasta, and for the first minute or so here, I want to really stir it. During that time is when the pasta will stick to itself the most. Now, from here, you want to cook it according to the package directions. Usually it's going to be 8 to 12 minutes. You want to slightly undercook your pasta. The reason why is because we're going to continue cooking it in the sauce. So very slightly undercook it here. You want the water to come up, back up to a boil, but you want it more as a gentle boil. You don't want it as just a full-blown violent boil. See what I've got right there? That's probably where I want to keep it. So I'm going to lower my heat. If you keep it at a full, violent, rapid boil, what's going to happen is all the starch on the outside of your pasta is going to just get completely blown apart. It's going to be a very mushy pasta, and it's not what you're looking for here. So take your time here. It's better to do this a little too slowly and just have to cook it a little bit more than try to rush it. All right, so our next step is an optional step here. It's making the crumb coating on the top if you are somebody that really likes having that crunchy, crispy top. All right, so I'm gonna take the 3 tablespoons of butter and I'm gonna just put that into the pan on about medium-high heat. Does not matter if you use non-stick or stainless steel. Does not matter at all. All right, I'm just gonna wait for that to melt down here. All right, when it's almost nearly melted, I'm gonna add in my breadcrumbs. Just give that a quick toss in the butter. Now at this point, if you wanna flavor your breadcrumb topping, you can. I'm gonna add a little bit of black pepper here, a little bit of chili powder, a little bit of garlic powder, and then just some chopped parsley right in there. I'm not going to do specific amounts, I'm just eyeballing it here. Alright, then I'm just going to saute this until the breadcrumbs become browned and nice and crispy. Should just be a couple of minutes on medium-high heat here. Just keep an eye on it. If you start to smell it become really toasted, then obviously take it off the heat. And I'm just going to let this cook. Now, if you want to practice your sauteing skill, remember, in a pan like this, you don't even need a spatula or anything. All you need to do is just push the pan away from you and flick it back towards you. So, just like this. If you're not comfortable with that, no worries. Just do it and stir it around. Oh, and I'm also going to add in a little bit of salt here. Alright, so you're starting to see the breadcrumbs are getting a little bit brown. Take this as far as you want. For me, that is good enough for me, so I'm going to just simply take the breadcrumbs, just put it onto a plate, let that cool, and then this will be my garnish. All right, so now that my sauce is ready, I'm gonna pay attention to the pasta here. Now, when it's close to being ready, you need to test this. You need to taste it yourself. So I'm gonna take some noodles out, just run under some cold water, and give it a taste. Okay. For me, that's almost there. You want the pasta, like I said before, to be slightly undercooked. To me, that's a little bit too much. But in about a minute, I'm going to go ahead and drain this, and then we'll put together our mac and cheese. All right, now that my pasta is drained, just gonna dump it right in and just stir that together. And that looks awesome already. Now from here, you just have to judge depending on how thick you want your pasta, or how thick you want the sauce. For me, that actually is pretty perfect. So actually, I don't need to thin it out at all. At this point, you can mix in whatever you want. If you want to add in some cooked vegetables, I would definitely do that. Some chopped bacon is really good. But I'm going to go ahead and plate this right now. All right, and here we go. So here I just have some chopped tomatoes that I dressed in just a little bit of vinegar and extra virgin olive oil just right over the top. And then we got our breadcrumb coating. Just going to sprinkle that over the top here. And there we have it. Like I said, this is really customizable. Come up with your own flavors. A little parsley up top. You can add some more Parmesan cheese, whatever you'd like to do. All right, so there we have it. If you have any questions about the mise en place sheet, make sure that you ask me. And that is it for today.